Do you want to know what it feels like to discover that your own son has been slowly poisoning you for months? I mean literally poisoning you, watching you grow weaker and sicker each day while pretending to be your devoted caregiver. Because I thought I knew what betrayal was until I found the vial of antifreeze hidden behind my son's protein powder, with my name written on a piece of tape across the label like some kind of twisted science experiment. My name is Diane Washington. I'm 67 years old, and I'm about to tell you a story that will make you question everything you believe about family, trust, and the people we invite into our most vulnerable moments. I'm sitting here in my wheelchair, in this small apartment that reeks of bleach and fear, holding a medical report that explains why I've been feeling like death for the past 6 months. My hands are trembling as I read words like ethylene glycol poisoning, and intentional administration, and immediate intervention required. The same hands that my son Marcus has been holding so tenderly every morning as he gives me what he calls my special vitamin smoothie, the one that's supposed to help with my energy and joint pain. The same son who convinced me to make him my power of attorney last year because he was so concerned about my health, so devoted to making sure I got the best care possible. I remember that morning, 38 years ago, when Dr. Henderson sat across from me in his sterile office, his face grave as he delivered the news that would change everything. I was 29, 5 months pregnant with Marcus, and had been experiencing strange symptoms for weeks. Numbness in my legs, difficulty walking, episodes where I'd lose feeling in my fingers. I thought it was just pregnancy complications until the tests revealed the truth. A rare spinal condition that was being aggravated by the pressure and hormonal changes of pregnancy. I can still hear his voice, measured and clinical, as he explained my options with the detachment of someone discussing stock prices. "Mrs. Washington," he said, his pen clicking nervously against his clipboard. "Your condition is deteriorating rapidly. The pregnancy is putting immense pressure on your spinal cord. If you continue to full term, there's an 85% chance you'll be permanently paralyzed from the waist down." I felt my world crumble as those words sank in. I remember touching my belly instinctively, feeling Marcus kick against my palm as if he was trying to tell me he was worth whatever price I had to pay. Dr. Henderson continued, his voice growing softer but no less devastating. "However, if we terminate the pregnancy now, there's a good chance we can halt the progression, and you might retain most of your mobility." I looked at my husband then, Jerome, searching his face for some sign of guidance, some indication of what he thought I should do. But his expression was blank, a mask of shock and confusion that offered me no comfort. I asked Dr. Henderson how much time I had to decide, and he told me maybe a week, 2 at most, before the damage became irreversible, regardless of what choice I made. The cruelty of that timeline wasn't lost on me. 7 days to decide whether to sacrifice my body or sacrifice my child, as if such a decision could ever be made with calendars and clocks. That night, Jerome and I lay in bed like strangers, both staring at the ceiling, neither of us brave enough to voice what we were really thinking. The silence between us felt dangerous, loaded with all the resentment and fear that would eventually destroy us. Finally, I whispered into the darkness, "What would you do?" Jerome turned to face me, and I could see tears glistening in his eyes as he said, "Diane, baby, this has to be your choice. I'll support whatever you decide." But even as he said those words, I could hear the doubt in his voice, the quiet plea for me to choose him over the baby, to choose our future over this unknown child. I spent the next 5 days in a kind of spiritual agony that I wouldn't wish on anyone. I would sit in my favorite chair, the one Jerome had bought me for our 2nd anniversary, and I would talk to my unborn son about the impossible choice before us. I told him about his grandmother, my mother who had died in a car accident just 2 years earlier, and how she always said that children were God's way of showing us what real love looked like. I remembered her words about how a mother's heart could endure anything if it meant protecting her child, and I knew what I had to do. When I called Dr. Henderson on Friday morning, my voice was steady despite the fear coursing through my veins. "Doctor," I said, "I'm going to continue with the pregnancy. I'm going to have my baby." The silence on the other end stretched for what felt like hours before he responded, his professional composure finally cracking as he said, "Mrs. Washington, I have to ask you one more time. Are you absolutely certain? You understand that this decision is likely irreversible? I told him I understood completely, that I was willing to trade my legs for my son's life because some things were more precious than the ability to walk. The remaining months of my pregnancy were a slow descent into darkness. Each week brought new limitations, new pains, new reminders of what I was giving up. By 7 months, I needed a walker to get around. By 8 months, I was using a wheelchair most of the time. By the time Marcus decided to make his grand entrance 3 weeks early on a cold October morning, I had already lost most sensation in my legs. But when they placed that perfect, beautiful baby in my arms, when I looked into his dark eyes that seemed to see straight into my soul, I felt nothing but joy. In that moment, holding my son for the first time, I believed I had made the greatest trade in human history. Jerome tried to adjust to our new reality, but I could see the strain eating away at him day by day. He hired nurses to help with my care, converted our home to be wheelchair accessible, and even learned how to help me with basic tasks I could no longer do myself. But every time he looked at me, I could see the ghost of the woman I used to be reflected in his eyes, the woman who could stand beside him, who could dance in his arms, who could be his partner instead of his patient. Marcus was everything beautiful and perfect in a world that had become complicated and painful. He was a happy baby, always smiling, always reaching for me with those tiny hands that seemed to understand that I had chosen him over everything else. I poured every ounce of energy I had into being the mother he deserved, learning to change diapers from my wheelchair, figuring out how to bathe him safely, adapting to every challenge that came with raising a child while paralyzed. He became my purpose, my proof that sacrifice could create something magnificent. But as Marcus grew from a baby into a toddler, the cracks in my marriage began to spread like a virus. Jerome started working longer hours, finding reasons to be away from home, from me, from the reality of what our life had become. When he was home, he seemed like a ghost, present in body, but absent in spirit. Our conversations became mechanical exchanges about Marcus's needs, household logistics, and medical appointments. The intimacy we once shared became a memory from another lifetime, something that existed before my wheelchair became the third person in our marriage. I remember the exact moment I knew Jerome was planning to leave me. Marcus was 18 months old, just learning to walk with that adorable toddler wobble that makes every parent's heart melt. I was in my wheelchair in our living room, cheering him on as he stumbled from the couch toward my outstretched arms. Jerome was standing in the doorway watching, and when Marcus finally made it to me and I swept him up in celebration, I looked toward my husband expecting to share that moment of parental pride. Instead, I saw something in his expression that chilled me to the bone: regret, resentment, and what looked like barely contained anger. That night, after Marcus was asleep, Jerome sat down across from me with the look of a man about to deliver a death sentence. His hands were shaking as he spoke, his voice barely audible as he said, "Diane, I can't do this anymore. Every day I look at you in that chair, and I'm reminded of the choice you made, the choice that changed everything for all of us. I know you thought you were doing the right thing, but I can't stop thinking about all the other children we could have had, all the different ways this could have gone." I felt my heart stop as he continued, each word like acid being poured into an open wound. "I love you," he said, and I could hear him crying. "But I can't love this life. I can't pretend that seeing you like this doesn't destroy something inside me every single day. And I can't pretend that I don't blame you for choosing him over us." I asked him what he was trying to tell me, though I already knew my world was about to collapse again. Jerome looked away, unable to meet my eyes, and whispered, "I want a divorce. I've already talked to a lawyer." The divorce proceedings were swift and brutal. Jerome got weekend visitation with Marcus, but he used it less and less as the months passed. Eventually, his visits became occasional phone calls, then birthday cards that arrived late, then nothing at all. By the time Marcus was 6, his father had completely vanished from our lives, leaving behind only monthly child support payments that felt more like hush money than paternal responsibility. I dedicated myself to raising Marcus with an intensity that bordered on obsession. He became my world, my vindication, the living proof that my sacrifice had been worthwhile. I was determined to be everything to him: mother, father, best friend, protector, and cheerleader. I was going to love him enough for two parents, to show him that sometimes the greatest strength comes from the deepest sacrifice. I built my entire identity around being his mother, around being the woman who had given up everything for her child. Marcus thrived under my devotion. He was a brilliant child, charming and creative, with a natural charisma that made him popular wherever he went. He excelled in school, made friends easily, and seemed genuinely proud of having a mother who was different from everyone else's. He would defend me when other children asked questions about my wheelchair, would beam with pride when I showed up to his school events, despite the challenges involved in getting there. As Marcus grew into his teenage years, our bond only seemed to strengthen. While other mothers complained about their rebellious teenagers, Marcus remained close to me, confiding in me about his friends, his dreams, his fears. He would spend hours talking to me about his plans for the future, about how he was going to take care of me when he got older, about how grateful he was for everything I had sacrificed for him. I felt like the luckiest mother in the world. When Marcus graduated from high school with honors, he surprised me by announcing that he wanted to stay home for college, to attend the local community college so he could help take care of me. I protested, telling him he should go away to school, experience life on his own, but he insisted. "Mom," he said, looking at me with those same dark eyes that had convinced me to choose his life over my mobility. "You gave up everything for me. The least I can do is make sure you're taken care of." I cried that night, overwhelmed with pride and love for this incredible young man I had raised. Marcus enrolled in a pre-med program, claiming he wanted to become a doctor so he could better understand my condition and help me manage my care. He took over many of the household responsibilities, grocery shopping, cleaning, even helping me with personal care tasks that had become more difficult as I aged. He was attentive and loving, always asking about my pain levels, my energy, my mood. He started researching supplements and vitamins that might help with my condition, ordering special protein powders and health drinks that he claimed would boost my immune system and improve my quality of life. If you're watching this and you've ever trusted someone completely with your life and health, please hit that subscribe button, because what I'm about to tell you will shock you to your core and make you question everyone around you. About 8 months ago, Marcus became especially concerned about my health. He noticed that I seemed to be getting weaker, that I was experiencing more fatigue and confusion than usual. He convinced me to see a new doctor, someone he had researched who specialized in spinal cord injuries and long-term paralysis. Dr. Martinez was young and thorough, and after running extensive tests, she told me that my symptoms were likely related to the natural aging process combined with decades of living with paralysis. Marcus was devastated by this news, or at least he appeared to be. He became even more attentive, insisting on preparing all my meals himself, making sure I took all my medications and supplements exactly on schedule. He created detailed charts tracking my symptoms, my energy levels, even my mood changes. He told me he was documenting everything so he could help the doctors better understand what was happening to me. That's when Marcus suggested that I make him my power of attorney, just in case my condition continued to deteriorate. "Mom," he said, his voice full of concern and love, "I need to be able to make medical decisions for you if something happens. I need to be able to access your accounts to pay for your care. I just want to make sure you're protected." It seemed so reasonable, so loving, so practical. Here was my devoted son, willing to take on the responsibility of caring for his disabled mother. I signed the papers without hesitation, but over the past few months, I've been getting sicker and sicker. The fatigue became overwhelming, my thinking became cloudy, and I started experiencing nausea and stomach pain that no amount of medication seemed to help. Marcus was always there with his special smoothies, his concerned expressions, his gentle insistence that I needed to rest more, eat less solid food, rely more heavily on the liquid supplements he prepared for me. Yesterday, while Marcus was at school, I managed to wheel myself into the kitchen to get some water. I was feeling dizzy and disoriented, worse than I had in weeks, when I accidentally knocked over a container on the counter. Protein powder spilled everywhere, and as I was cleaning it up, I noticed something behind the container that made my blood run cold. It was a small glass vial, the kind used for laboratory chemicals, with a handwritten label that simply said, "Diane, small doses only." I managed to get the vial into my wheelchair bag before Marcus came home, and this morning, while he was in class, I wheeled myself to the police station. The officer who tested the contents looked at me with a mixture of horror and pity as he told me it was ethylene glycol, antifreeze, in a concentration that would be lethal in large doses but could cause exactly the symptoms I'd been experiencing if administered in small amounts over time. The medical report confirms what I already knew in my heart but couldn't bring myself to believe. My own son, the child I chose over my own mobility, the child I dedicated my entire life to raising and loving, has been slowly poisoning me for months. The same hands that have been stroking my hair and holding mine in comfort have been measuring out doses of poison to put in my food. The same voice that has been telling me how much he loves me has been lying to me every single day. But here's what I still can't understand. What's driving me to the edge of madness as I sit here with this evidence of his betrayal clutched in my shaking hands? Why would Marcus want to kill me? What could he possibly gain from my death that he doesn't already have through his power of attorney? What kind of hatred could drive someone to slowly murder the woman who sacrificed everything for his very existence? And that's when I realized there was so much more to this story that I didn't know. So many secrets my devoted son had been keeping from me while he smiled and fed me poison and planned for a future I wasn't going to be alive to see. I never imagined that the sound of my own son's key turning in the lock could fill me with such terror. I'm sitting here in my wheelchair, the police report hidden in my lap, waiting for Marcus to come home from his classes, and I can feel my heart hammering against my ribs like a caged bird trying to escape. Every instinct I have is screaming at me to confront him, to demand answers, to ask him why he's been slowly killing the woman who gave up everything for his existence. But another part of me, the part that still remembers the sweet baby I held in my arms 38 years ago, is begging me to find some other explanation, some way that this could all be a terrible mistake. I hear his footsteps in the hallway now, that familiar rhythm that used to bring me such comfort, and now makes my skin crawl with fear. Marcus calls out his usual greeting. "Hey Mom, I'm home. How are you feeling today?" And I have to bite my tongue to keep from screaming. How am I feeling? I'm feeling like I've been poisoned by my own child. Like everything I believed about love and sacrifice and family has been revealed as a cruel joke. Instead, I managed to call back, "I'm okay, sweetheart." And I hate how easily the lie rolls off my tongue. How naturally I slip back into the role of the trusting mother, even when I know he's been planning my death. Marcus walks into the living room with that same gentle smile he's worn for months, the one I now realize is the mask of a killer. He's carrying his backpack and a small paper bag from the pharmacy, and he immediately comes over to kiss my forehead, just like he does every day. The casual intimacy of that gesture, knowing what I now know, makes me feel sick to my stomach. "I picked up your new calcium supplements," he says, shaking the bottle so I can hear the pills rattle inside. "The pharmacist said these should help with your bone density." I nod and smile, playing my part in this twisted performance, while inside I'm wondering if those pills are actually calcium, or just another method of delivering poison into my system. After Marcus goes to his room to change clothes, I sit alone in the living room trying to piece together the timeline of my deteriorating health with his increased attention and care. It's been almost exactly 8 months since he started preparing my special smoothies. 8 months since he began insisting that I needed more liquid nutrition and less solid food. 8 months of gradual weakness, confusion, nausea, and fatigue that I attributed to aging and my long-term disability. 8 months of my devoted son documenting every symptom, every change, every decline in my condition with the thoroughness of a scientist conducting an experiment. I remember now how excited Marcus was when I first started getting sick, how quickly he jumped into action with research and solutions and special care protocols. At the time, I thought it was love and concern driving his behavior. Now I realize it was something much more sinister. He was monitoring the effects of his poison, adjusting dosages, perfecting his method of slowly destroying me while maintaining the perfect facade of the caring son. The most disturbing part is how good he's gotten at this deception. Even now, knowing what I know, watching him move around our kitchen preparing what he calls a healing broth for my dinner, I can see how easily he slips between his two identities. One moment he's measuring out ingredients with the precision of someone who knows exactly what he's doing, and the next he's humming softly to himself like any normal young man making soup for his sick mother. The transition is so seamless, so natural, that I find myself questioning my own sanity, despite the evidence literally hidden beneath my blanket. When Marcus brings me the bowl of broth, steam rising from its surface like some kind of offering to the gods of deception, I have to force myself not to recoil from his touch. He sets up my dinner tray with the same careful attention he's shown for months, adjusting the height so I can reach everything easily, placing a napkin in my lap, even adding a small flower from our windowsill garden to make the presentation more cheerful. "I added some new herbs to this recipe," he says, settling into the chair across from me with his own bowl. "I read that they can help with inflammation and pain management." I take a small sip, and it tastes exactly like it always does, rich and nourishing with just a slight bitter aftertaste that Marcus has always attributed to the medicinal herbs he includes. Now I know that bitter taste is probably the antifreeze, carefully measured and disguised among flavors that mask its presence. I watch Marcus eat his own portion with apparent enjoyment, and I realize he must have prepared 2 different batches, one poisoned for me and one safe for himself. The level of premeditation required for this kind of long-term deception is staggering, and it forces me to confront a truth I've been avoiding. Whoever my son has become, he's not the child I raised. After dinner, Marcus settles in for what has become our evening routine. He sits beside my wheelchair with his laptop, supposedly working on his pre-med coursework while keeping me company. Sometimes he reads passages aloud from his textbooks, explaining complex medical concepts in terms he thinks I can understand. Tonight, he's reading about toxicology, and the irony is so sharp it's almost funny. "Did you know, Mom," he says, his voice filled with what sounds like genuine academic enthusiasm, "that some poisons can actually be therapeutic in small doses? The difference between medicine and poison is often just a matter of quantity and timing." I want to laugh at the audacity of it, the way he can sit there discussing poison while he's been slowly killing me with it. But instead, I just nod and make appropriate sounds of interest. "That's fascinating, sweetheart," I hear myself say, and I'm amazed at how normal my voice sounds when inside I'm screaming. Marcus continues reading, occasionally looking up at me with those dark eyes that I gave him, those eyes that once convinced me to choose his life over my own mobility, and I realize that he's enjoying this game. He's getting some kind of twisted pleasure from educating me about the very methods he's using to destroy me. The most chilling moment comes when he closes his laptop and looks directly at me with an expression I can't quite read. "Mom," he says, his voice softer now, more intimate, "I want you to know how grateful I am for everything you've done for me. The sacrifice you made, choosing to have me even though it cost you your legs. It's something I think about every day." I feel tears start to form in my eyes, not from gratitude for his acknowledgement, but from the sheer cruelty of hearing these words from someone who's been slowly murdering me. "I've been thinking a lot lately about sacrifice," Marcus continues, and I can hear something different in his tone now, something that makes my skin crawl. About how sometimes love requires us to make really hard choices, choices that other people might not understand. "I think you taught me that, Mom. You taught me that sometimes you have to hurt someone in order to help them, that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to end someone's suffering." The blood in my veins turns to ice as I realize what he's really saying. This isn't just about money or inheritance or power of attorney. Marcus actually believes he's performing some kind of mercy killing, that he's ending my suffering out of love and compassion. In his twisted mind, he's not murdering his mother. He's saving her from a life he's decided isn't worth living. If you've ever discovered that someone you trusted completely has been lying to you about everything, share this story, because what happens next will shake you to your core. I manage to keep my voice steady as I ask, "What kind of suffering are you talking about, Marcus?" He reaches over and takes my hand in his, the same gesture of comfort he's made thousands of times. But now his touch feels like ice against my skin. "Mom, look at your life honestly. You've been in that chair for almost 40 years. Dad left because he couldn't handle what you became. You've never had another relationship, never experienced real intimacy or partnership again. You can't travel. You can't do most of the things that make life worth living, and now you're getting sicker and weaker every day. I want to interrupt him, to tell him that my life has been full of meaning and purpose, that raising him gave me more joy than any physical ability ever could. But something stops me. I need to hear this, need to understand the full scope of his delusion, so I can figure out how to survive it. Marcus continues, his voice growing more passionate, more convinced of his own righteousness. I've watched you pretend to be happy for years, but I can see the pain in your eyes, the way you struggle just to get through each day. And it's only going to get worse as you age. More pain, more limitations, more dependence on other people. Is that really the life you want to live? Is that really fair to either of us? The casual way he includes himself in this equation, as if my continued existence is somehow a burden on him, reveals the depth of his selfishness. This isn't mercy. It's convenience disguised as compassion. I'm starting to see the real Marcus now, the one who's been hiding behind the mask of the devoted son, and he's a stranger to me. I know this is hard to hear, he says, squeezing my hand tighter, but I've been doing research on end-of-life options for people in your situation. There are ways to make the transition peaceful, dignified, without the prolonged suffering that's coming. Natural methods that look like the progression of your existing health problems. My blood runs cold as I realize he's been planning this for much longer than 8 months. He's been researching methods of killing me, studying my medical condition to find the perfect cover story for my murder. The antifreeze isn't just random poison. It's carefully chosen to mimic the symptoms of complications from long-term paralysis. The beautiful thing about it, Marcus continues, and I can hear the excitement in his voice now, the pride of someone explaining a complex plan, is that no one would question it. You're a 67-year-old woman who's been paralyzed for decades. Kidney failure, organ shutdown, systemic breakdown. It's exactly what doctors would expect to see. And I'll be right there with you, the grieving son who did everything possible to care for his disabled mother. I feel like I'm going to vomit as the full scope of his plan becomes clear. He's not just killing me. He's setting himself up as the hero of my story, the devoted caregiver who sacrificed his youth to take care of his disabled mother until her natural death. He'll probably milk that narrative for years, gaining sympathy and admiration from everyone who knows us. But Marcus, I managed to whisper, my voice barely audible. What about everything we've shared? What about all the love between us? Doesn't that mean anything to you? His expression shifts slightly, and for a moment I see something that might be genuine emotion cross his face. Of course it means something, Mom. That's exactly why I'm doing this. I love you too much to watch you suffer unnecessarily. This is my gift to you, my way of repaying everything you sacrificed for me. I'm giving you peace. The twisted logic of his reasoning is breathtaking. He's convinced himself that murder is actually the ultimate act of love, that by killing me, he's somehow honoring the sacrifice I made to bring him into the world. It's narcissism and delusion wrapped up in a package of false compassion, and I realize that the son I thought I knew never really existed at all. That night, after Marcus goes to bed, I lie awake staring at the ceiling and trying to process everything I've learned. The child I carried in my womb, the baby I chose over my own mobility, the young man I've loved and protected and sacrificed for throughout his entire life. He's been planning my death with the same methodical care that other people use to plan vacations or career changes. But what terrifies me even more than his plan to kill me is the realization that he's already started putting other pieces into motion. Over the past few months, Marcus has been subtly isolating me from the few friends and distant relatives I still maintain contact with. When my cousin Sarah called to check on me, Marcus told her I was having bad days and didn't feel up to talking. When my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, knocked on the door to bring me homemade soup, Marcus answered and told her I was sleeping and couldn't be disturbed. When Dr. Martinez's office called to schedule a follow-up appointment, Marcus handled the call and rescheduled for a date that's still weeks away. I realize now that he's been systematically cutting off my connections to the outside world, creating a situation where I'm completely dependent on him for contact with other people. If I were to disappear gradually, becoming sicker and more reclusive until I finally died, there would be very few people in a position to question the story he tells about my decline. The most chilling part is how perfectly he's played the role of the devoted son throughout this entire process. Every conversation we've had about my health, every expression of concern, every gentle touch and caring gesture, it's all been part of an elaborate performance designed to establish his credibility as my primary caregiver. When I die, everyone will remember Marcus as the young man who put his life on hold to care for his disabled mother, who did everything humanly possible to keep her comfortable and healthy until the inevitable end. But I'm not dead yet, and I'm not going quietly into whatever peaceful death he has planned for me. The question now is how to stop him without putting myself in even greater danger, how to expose his plan without giving him a reason to accelerate his timeline. Because I've realized something that chills me to the bone. If Marcus suspects that I know what he's doing, there's nothing stopping him from deciding that my suffering needs to end much sooner than he originally planned. And as I lie here in the darkness, listening to him move around in his room, probably researching new methods or calculating dosages, I can't shake the feeling that he's already made that decision, that my discovery of his plan has changed everything, and that I may not have much time left to figure out how to save my own life from the child I gave up everything to create. I woke up this morning to the sound of Marcus whistling in the kitchen, that cheerful melody he always hums when he's preparing my breakfast, and I knew with absolute certainty that today was the day he planned to kill me. There was something different in the rhythm of his movements, something final and decisive that made my skin crawl with terror. I could hear him opening cabinet doors with more purpose than usual, the clink of glass against glass that suggested he was preparing something special for my morning smoothie, something that would end our twisted dance once and for all. I lay in bed for as long as I could, delaying the inevitable moment when I would have to wheel myself into the kitchen and face the son who had become my executioner. My body was trembling uncontrollably, not from the poison that had been slowly destroying me for months, but from the pure adrenaline of knowing that these could be my final hours on Earth. I thought about the irony of it all. 38 years ago, I had chosen to sacrifice my legs to give Marcus life, and now he was going to repay that sacrifice by taking my life away. When I finally gathered the courage to leave my bedroom, I found Marcus standing at the kitchen counter with his back to me, his shoulders moving with the practiced motions of someone who had done this countless times before. On the counter beside him, I could see the familiar ingredients for my daily smoothie: protein powder, fruits, vitamins. But there was also something new, a small glass vial that caught the morning light and sparkled like liquid diamonds. I knew without asking that this was the final dose, the amount that would finish what he had started 8 months ago. "Good morning, Mom," Marcus said without turning around, his voice filled with the same artificial warmth he had used every day of this nightmare. "I made your favorite today, strawberry banana with extra protein. I added some new supplements that I think will really help with your energy levels." The casual lies rolled off his tongue so easily that I wondered how long he had been deceiving me about other things. How many years of our relationship had been built on manipulation and false affection. I wheeled myself to the kitchen table, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the wheels of my chair. Marcus turned around with that familiar smile, the one that had once brought me such joy and now filled me with dread. And I realized that he was different this morning. There was a lightness in his expression, a sense of relief and anticipation that told me he was looking forward to what was coming. This wasn't the reluctant mercy killing he had described to me. This was something he wanted to do, something that excited him. "You look pale this morning, Mom," he said, bringing the smoothie to the table and setting it down in front of me with ceremony. "Are you feeling all right? Maybe this will help restore some color to your cheeks." I stared at the pink liquid in the glass, knowing that it contained my death sentence, and I realized that I had to make a choice. I could drink it and die quietly, as Marcus expected, or I could fight for my life and risk his wrath when he realized I had discovered his plan. I chose to fight. Instead of picking up the glass, I looked directly into my son's eyes and said, "Marcus, I found the antifreeze hidden behind your protein powder." The change in his expression was immediate and terrifying. The mask of caring concern dropped away instantly, replaced by something cold and calculating that made me realize I was looking at a complete stranger. For a long moment, we stared at each other across the table, mother and son, victim and killer, and I could see him rapidly calculating his options. "I don't know what you're talking about, Mom," he said finally, but his voice had lost all its artificial warmth. "You must be confused. Maybe you're having another one of your foggy episodes." He was trying to gaslight me even now, even when we both knew the game was over, and I felt a surge of anger that gave me strength I didn't know I still possessed. "I took it to the police yesterday," I said, watching his face carefully. "They tested it. They know what you've been doing to me." This was partially true. I had taken the vial to the police, but I hadn't filed a formal report yet. I had been too afraid, too confused, too desperate to find some other explanation. But now, seeing the way Marcus's jaw tightened and his hands clenched into fists, I knew I should have acted sooner. "You stupid bitch," he said, and the venom in his voice was like a physical blow. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Do you know how carefully I planned this, how perfect it was going to be? You were going to die peacefully, with dignity, and everyone was going to remember me as the devoted son who took care of his disabled mother until the end. But you had to ruin it, didn't you? You had to go snooping around where you didn't belong." The transformation was complete now. The loving son was gone, replaced by someone I had never seen before. Someone whose hatred was so pure and intense, it took my breath away. I realized that this was who Marcus really was beneath all the lies and performance. A narcissistic killer who had been playing the role of the perfect son while planning my murder. "Why, Marcus?" I whispered, my voice breaking with pain that went deeper than any physical injury I had ever endured. "Why do you want to kill me? What did I ever do to deserve this?" He laughed then, a sound so cold and bitter it made my blood freeze in my veins. "What did you do?" he repeated, his voice rising to a near shout. "You destroyed my entire life before I was even born. You chose to be a cripple instead of giving me a normal mother, a normal family, a normal childhood. Do you know what it was like growing up with a mother in a wheelchair? Do you know how the other kids looked at us? How they talked about us behind our backs?" I felt my heart shatter as I realized that all the pride I thought he had felt about me, all the times I believed he was defending me, had actually been sources of shame and resentment. Everything I had interpreted as love had actually been hatred festering beneath the surface. "And then," Marcus continued, pacing now like a caged animal, "Dad left because he couldn't stand looking at you anymore, and I was stuck taking care of the woman who ruined everything. Do you know how many opportunities I've missed because I had to pretend to be the devoted son? How many relationships? How many chances for a normal life I've given up because of your selfish decision to have me instead of fixing yourself?" The cruelty of his words was staggering, but what hurt most was realizing that he genuinely believed I had been selfish in choosing to have him. In his mind, my greatest act of love, sacrificing my mobility to give him life, was actually the ultimate act of selfishness. "I've spent years perfecting this plan," he said, his voice calmer now, but no less menacing. "Learning about poisons, studying your medical condition, figuring out exactly how to make your death look natural. I even got into pre-med so I'd have better access to the information and chemicals I needed. Everything I've done for the past 5 years has been leading up to this moment. 5 years. He had been planning my murder since he was 22 years old, probably since before he even graduated from high school. All those years of seeming devotion, of staying home to care for me, of expressing gratitude for my sacrifice, it had all been an elaborate setup for murder. But now you've ruined everything," Marcus said, and I could see him getting more agitated, more dangerous. "If the police already know about the antifreeze, I can't let you die slowly anymore. It has to look like an accident, or like you did it yourself." The implication was clear. He was going to kill me right now, in a way that would look like suicide or some kind of accident. I knew I had only seconds to act before he made good on that threat. With strength I didn't know I still possessed, I grabbed the smoothie glass and threw it as hard as I could at his head. It shattered against the wall behind him, pink liquid and glass fragments exploding across the kitchen, and in that moment of shock and confusion, I managed to wheel myself toward the front door. But Marcus was faster than I anticipated. He caught up with me before I could reach the deadbolt, grabbing the back of my wheelchair and spinning me around to face him. His face was twisted with rage, and I could see that whatever thin veneer of humanity he had been maintaining was completely gone now. "You're going to die today, Mom," he said, his voice deadly calm. "The only question is whether it's going to look like an accident or whether I'm going to have to make it look like the crazy old cripple finally snapped and killed herself." He started pushing my wheelchair toward the bathroom, and I realized he was planning to drown me in the bathtub, probably positioning it to look like I had fallen and couldn't get out. That's when I heard the most beautiful sound in the world, a knock at the front door, followed by a familiar voice calling out, "Police! Open up!" I had lied when I told Marcus I had already filed a report, but apparently my visit to the police station yesterday had triggered some kind of welfare check. Or maybe they had taken the antifreeze more seriously than I thought. Marcus froze, his hands still gripping my wheelchair, his face cycling through a range of emotions, panic, rage, calculation. I could see him trying to figure out if he had time to kill me before the police broke down the door, weighing his options like some kind of twisted cost-benefit analysis. "Mrs. Washington, are you all right in there?" the officer called out, and I summoned every ounce of strength I had left to scream back, "Help me! He's trying to kill me! My son is trying to kill me!" The sound of the door being forced open was like music to my ears. Within seconds, 2 police officers rushed into our living room, their weapons drawn, taking in the scene of Marcus standing behind my wheelchair with his hands still gripping the handles. One officer immediately moved to separate us, while the other began reading Marcus his rights. As they handcuffed my son, this stranger who had been pretending to be my child, I watched his face transform one final time. The rage and calculation were replaced by something that looked almost like relief, as if he was glad the pretense was finally over. Glad he no longer had to maintain the exhausting charade of being the loving son. "You never deserved me," he said, as they led him toward the door, his voice flat and emotionless. "You never deserved any of the sacrifice I made for you. I should have killed you years ago." Those were the last words my son ever spoke to me, and they contained more honesty than anything he had said to me in years. The months that followed were a blur of legal proceedings, medical treatments to reverse the damage from the antifreeze poisoning, and therapy sessions to help me process the betrayal that had nearly cost me my life. Marcus was convicted of attempted murder and conspiracy to commit murder, sentenced to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge called it one of the most calculated and cold-blooded cases she had ever seen, and I had to agree. But the legal resolution didn't heal the wound that Marcus had left in my heart. For 38 years, I had believed that my sacrifice had been worthwhile, that choosing his life over my mobility had been the greatest act of love imaginable. Now I had to confront the possibility that I had given up everything for someone who was incapable of love, someone who had seen my sacrifice not as a gift, but as a burden. The hardest part wasn't even his attempt to kill me. It was realizing that the child I thought I had raised, the young man I had loved with every fiber of my being, had never really existed. The real Marcus was a narcissistic killer who had spent years perfecting the art of deception, and I had been his primary victim long before he ever started putting antifreeze in my smoothies. But here's what I've learned in the months since his arrest, sitting in this same wheelchair, in this same apartment, but finally free from the fear that had been consuming me for so long. My sacrifice wasn't worthless because Marcus turned out to be a monster. My sacrifice was an act of love, pure and simple, and the fact that it was misplaced doesn't diminish its value. I chose life over convenience, hope over fear, love over self-preservation, and those choices defined who I am, regardless of how they were received. I've also learned that survival isn't just about staying alive. It's about refusing to let someone else's hatred define your worth. Marcus wanted me to see myself the way he saw me, as a burden, as a mistake, as someone whose life wasn't worth living. But I refused to accept his version of my story. I am a woman who made an impossible choice out of love, who raised a child with devotion and sacrifice, and who survived an attempt on my life by someone who should have protected me above all others. If you're still watching this, if you've stayed with me through this entire journey of betrayal and survival, please take a moment to comment below and share your own stories of overcoming betrayal. Because the most important thing I've learned is that we don't survive these experiences alone. We survive them by connecting with others who understand what it means to have your trust shattered and still find the courage to keep living. I'm 67 years old. I've been in this wheelchair for 38 years, and I'm still here. I'm still breathing, still thinking, still feeling, still choosing hope over despair every single day. Marcus may have taken my trust and my sense of safety, but he didn't take my life, and he didn't take my spirit. I am not the victim of his story. I am the survivor of my own. And sometimes, in the quiet moments when I'm alone with my thoughts, I even find myself grateful for what happened. Not grateful that my son tried to kill me, but grateful that I discovered who he really was before it was too late. Grateful that I found the strength to fight back. Grateful that I lived to tell this story and maybe help someone else recognize the signs of betrayal before it destroys them. The truth is, I don't know if I'll ever fully heal from what Marcus did to me. The physical effects of the poisoning may fade, but the emotional scars will probably be with me for the rest of my life. But I've decided that healing isn't about forgetting or forgiving. It's about refusing to let someone else's evil diminish your own light. I chose life 38 years ago when I decided to have Marcus, despite the cost to my body. I chose life again 8 months ago when I decided to investigate the symptoms that were slowly killing me. And I choose life today, tomorrow, and every day after that, not because it's easy, but because it's the most powerful act of defiance I can offer against those who would destroy me. My name is Diane Washington. I'm 67 years old. I've been paralyzed for most of my adult life, and I'm still here. I'm still fighting, still surviving, still choosing love over hatred, even when hatred seems easier. And if my story can help even one person recognize the signs of betrayal in their own life, if it can give even one person the courage to fight back against those who would harm them, then everything I've been through will have been worthwhile. Because that's what love really means. Not the desperate devotion I showed Marcus, not the blind trust that nearly got me killed, but the fierce determination to protect yourself and others from those who would do harm. Real love requires boundaries, requires wisdom, requires the courage to see people as they really are rather than as we wish they were. I still sit in this wheelchair, in this same apartment, but I'm not the same woman who started this story. I'm stronger now, wiser, more careful about who I trust with my heart and my life. And while I may never have another child to love, I have something that's almost as precious. I have the knowledge that I survived the ultimate betrayal and came out the other side with my humanity intact. The price of unconditional love, I've learned, is that sometimes the people we love most are the ones who hurt us deepest. But the price of conditional love, love with boundaries, love with wisdom, love with self-protection, is that we get to keep living, keep hoping, keep believing in the possibility of real connection with people who are worthy of our trust. I'm still learning how to love conditionally, still figuring out how to protect myself while remaining open to authentic relationships. It's harder than the blind devotion I showed Marcus, but it's also safer, healthier, and more honest. And maybe, someday, I'll find people who are worthy of the love I have to give, people who will cherish my sacrifice rather than resent it. People who will see my wheelchair as part of my story rather than the defining feature of my limitations. Until then, I'll keep choosing life, keep choosing hope, keep choosing to believe that my story isn't over yet. Because sometimes the greatest act of love isn't sacrificing everything for someone else. It's refusing to let someone else's betrayal destroy your capacity for joy, connection, and meaning. And that's a lesson worth living for.